What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia stock, ticker symbol NVDA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, April 10th. Alright guys, Nvidia stock here today down $17.79 per share. That's minus 2.04%. We barely held on today to a very crucial level. Let's take a look at this name. Let's try to get out everything that the market will possibly give us heading into tomorrow, including directional bias and volatility bias. We'll do the expected move and the traders in the chain. So let's get started here with just a quick analysis here of the volume profile on the 5-minute chart. The primary move that I'm interested in here today is that big dump off and then recovery into midday. From there, we saw a lot of consolidation, and then we saw kind of a reclaim into the close. That reclaim move. So I want to take a look at that one as well, just briefly. If we start from left to right here, we can see we have that contextual open and fade. During this downside move, though, we started to see a lot of increasing volume, broken up by just one green bar, and then a couple of really high volume red bars. Understand that that second red bar is a battle bar. You can see, if I delete this, that there's a wick there. That tells me that quite a bit of the volume on that second bigger red bar was also buying volume. That's what I mean by a battle bar, right? You're getting a lot of buyers and sellers battling it out. The break downside, however, on 850, the break through that technical level of 850, we know that that's going to produce some volume because it's a break of a big area, and that's exactly what we got. And there's no denying there was bearish bias there as we headed into that downside move. And what's most important is to consider the context of that typical volume at that time of day, which would, be quite a bit lower usually than the open. Once we came into the intraday bottom and started to bounce, we saw volume taper off, okay, which tells me that there's really no bias coming from the other side from that bounce. Okay, so we really just got a lot of bearish bias on the break of 850 on the candle that broke, which not only helps reinforce the fact that 850 is a technical and psychological level, but it also tells us that the bears were strong. It does tell us that the bulls put up a little bit of a fight on the bar after the fact, eventually able to catch ourselves at that intraday low a few candles later. But bulls, just understand, the bears did kind of win this morning here in Nvidia. Now, they didn't win the day necessarily, okay, because we reclaimed right heading into the, listen, it was the last bar of the day, and we got a little bit of increasing volume. These two bars, this is not out of context. We always expect the last bar of the day to be a little bit higher volume. And we also know that we've seen on these big blue chips, that immediate 5-minute bar after the bell, there's a lot of rebalancing going on with funds and institutions. So that's also very normal there. There was nothing out of context. All right, let's move on now to the 30-minute. We need to take a look at the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels on this chart. You'll notice it's very simple. I have the 50 period and the 200 period because all I'm interested in here is the psychology of a commonly watched time frame. Now, specific to the 30-minute chart here, you can see that we tried to reclaim that 50 period today and we got rejected on increasing volume after the rejection. Bears, you guys like to see that, okay? Whereas bulls, we reclaimed this level that we'll talk about more so on the daily, but we now have this 50 period in a descending position coming lower. Bulls, that means that the gap to reclaim is getting smaller as that comes lower, but bears also like to see, you have to understand, the bears want that 50 period in a descending position to try to get that as descending psychological resistance. We're only about 1.5% away from a test of that 50 period though, so bulls, obviously what we're looking for as soon as possible, ideally prior to this level coming into 850, would be to reclaim that 50 period on high volume, retest on low volume, and then bounce up toward that 200 period on higher volume again. A high volume confirmation after a low volume test. Bears, for you guys, having this 50 period descend as quickly as possible and ideally get at or below 850 as soon as you possibly can, you guys want to see that to help beef up 850 as a potential resistance, but understand the stock's currently just barely above that level, so that reclaim is going to have to come first. Let's move on to the 4-hour chart, and you can see that what saved us really today is kind of that 200 period, right? At least to a degree here on the 4-hour chart. So we're now right up against that. Bulls, This 200 period is still in an ascending trend. We're at about 845, 846. I want to see this get above 850 as soon as possible, or at least at 850, with the stock remaining above 850, because that helps beef up that level. Not necessarily by double the strength. In my experience, it tends to add about 50% to the strength of a level when you have two heavy psychological levels meeting each other. That goes for both support and resistance. Whereas, you bears, ideally that 200 period staying below 850, so you guys can crack 850 back down to the downside, and then have an honest shot at cracking 200 as kind of a separate event, getting below both of those. Then you bears could allow the 200 to get up and kind of beef itself up with 850 as a resistance level, if that makes sense. Okay, bulls, of course, the goal is to hold 850 and the 200, and then work our way up toward the 50 period on the 4 hour and $900 a share, which brings us to the daily. Okay, this is like the big story. If there was one story that we had to explain, it would be the daily, okay, because it is the most clear. The 30 and the 4 hour add much needed context, but this is the one that has the most eyeballs. Listen, the story tomorrow is 850. The Bears had they took a pretty good run at 850 today, just barely failing. The Bulls brought it back right above heading into the close in the last 5 minutes. But listen, Bulls, it's time. We got to hold 850. It's the bottom end of that 850 to 9 channel. And a give up of 850 sets the Bears up for potentially a hard test of that 50-day moving average, which everybody's watching. It's just above $800 a share. So, Bulls, that is a positive. I like to see that because that helps beef up 800. Okay, but a break downside and hold below 850. We didn't see a hold today, right? A break and hold downside sets those Bears up for a test downside of that 50 period, or the 50-day moving average on the daily, and potentially $800 a share. So, Bulls, we want to hold 850 and try to utilize that in the near future as kind of a trampoline to make our way back up toward 9. Now, implied volatility here, you can see, is lower. It's low, low, low. It's going lower. Understand, the lower IV goes, right, in your intended trade time frame, the more IV crush you'll experience if you own purchased contracts, options, right? But at the same time, the lower that goes, the more favorable conditions become to buy new contracts while IV is sucked out. So you're not paying for like extra inflated IV value. It's really important to understand that if you want to be a profitable options trader, it's huge. You don't want to trade options blind to IV. It's how you get hurt. Now, let's do the expected move, okay? And the options bias. Listen, by the way, guys, Nvidia's a daily upload. It goes out at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time every single day, please. Again, I know a lot of you have by now, but if you have not done so, subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep the videos coming every day. Let's take a look at the expected move. The next expiration that we have here is this Friday, April 12th, okay? So if, we look at like the daily, and by the way, it's plus or minus $27.99 a share by close on April 12th. That's the expected move. We have no earnings in between now and then, so we can reasonably divide that by 3 trading days and get an equal amount for each day. That brings us to $9.33 of expected plus or minus move per day. But again, that assumes a green or red streak, so I like to add 50% to that number, okay, to make up for like a mix of red and green days, that volatility. And that brings us to about $14 per share, plus or minus, is the expected move for tomorrow, approximately, right? We have to do a little bit of guesswork with adding the 50%. I find that tends to be the best way to do it. That, of course, may change in the future as the volatility in the markets change, but right now, that's what I'm sticking with. 50% added to the, assuming no earnings events. You can divide by the amount of days left before the next expiration, and then add 50%. Now, that's the volatility bias, right? What about directional bias, aside from what we've already gathered doing the volume profile, the psychological levels, and the analysis as a whole? One more thing we can do here. This is my favorite part. I love looking at this. I've actually been looking at this for years, every day, on basically all the stocks I'm interested in. And I think it's really, even after all that time doing it, I still do it to this day. If it wasn't, I think, highly important to at least track on stocks that you're interested in, I wouldn't waste my time every day. But here we are. We have 1.44 million total contracts traded on Nvidia here today. This is just today now. 861,000 calls, 580,000 puts. So we do have a call side bias there. If we break it down by the short-term speculators, that 0 to 20 delta range, we have 365,000 calls and 215,000 puts. That's still a heavy call side bias with those short-term bets being placed. So the bulls are taking the cake here in the options chain on Nvidia today, heading into tomorrow, Wednesday. Listen, guys, if you're sick of feeling lost, you feel like you have no direction, your goal is to try to kind of expedite the process of whether that be going part-time, potentially even full-time as a trader. You know, I think if you find value in these videos, I think you'll also find quite a bit of value in the Roensch Capital Gold server. That link in the pinned comment, that'll take you to a page where you can select one of 4 membership options. They all, of course, have different perks. And depending on which one you go with, you'll get, you know, scalp setup alerts. All the memberships get the in-play stock alerts. These are the stocks that are at that very moment overrun by like emotional and beatable human traders. These are usually stocks that are moving, hitting scanners all over the world with a fresh catalyst. We also do unusual options activity. I human verify all of those before they go out. And of course, platinum one-on-one. I appreciate you guys. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It helps out tremendously. And I'll see you in the next one.